Fury said to a mouse that he met in the house, "Let us both go to law, I'll prosecute you." Come, I'll take no denial, we must have a trial, for really this morning I've nothing to do. Said the mouse to the cur, "Such a trial, dear sir, of no jury or judge will be wasting our breath." "I'll be judge, I'll be jury," said cunning old Fury. "I'll try the whole cause and condemn you to death." "You're not attending."
Your tail has a knot in it. Oh, let me help undo it.
"I shall do nothing of the sort. You insult me by talking such nonsense."
I didn't mean it. Where are you going? Please come back and finish your story.
On various pretexts, all the creatures moved off, and Alice was soon left alone. In a little while, however, she again heard a little pattering of footsteps in the distance, and she looked up eagerly. It was the White Rabbit, trotting slowly back again and looking anxiously about it as it went, as if it had lost something.
"The Duchess! Oh, my fur and whiskers! She'll get me executed, as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Oh, where can I have dropped them? Mary Ann, what are you doing out here? Run home this instant and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan."
Alice ran off at once in the direction it pointed to, without trying to explain the mistake it had made.
He took me for his housemaid. How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I'd better take him his fan and gloves. That is, if I can find them.
As she said this, she came upon a neat little house, on the door of which was a bright brass plate with the name W. Rabbit engraved upon it. She went in without knocking and hurried upstairs, in great fear lest she should meet the real Mary Ann and be turned out of the house before she had found the fan and gloves. She found her way into a tidy little room with a table in the window, and on it, as she had hoped, a fan and 2 or 3 pairs of tiny white kid gloves. She took up the fan and a pair of the gloves and was just going to leave when her eyes fell upon a little bottle that stood near the looking-glass. There was no label with the words, "Drink me," but still she uncorked it and put it to her lips.
I know something interesting is sure to happen whenever I eat or drink something, so I'll just see what this bottle does. I do hope it'll make me grow large again, for really I'm quite tired of being such a tiny little thing.
It did so indeed, and much sooner than she had expected. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling and had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She went on growing and growing, and very soon had to kneel down on the floor. In another minute, there was not even room for this, and she tried the effect of lying down with one elbow against the door and the other arm curled round her head. Still, she went on growing, and as a last resource, she put one arm out of the window and one foot up the chimney. Luckily for Alice, the little magic bottle had now had its full effect, and she grew no larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, and as there seemed to be no sort of chance for ever getting out of the room again, no wonder she felt unhappy.
It was much pleasanter at home, when one wasn't always growing larger and smaller and being ordered about by mice and rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down that rabbit hole, and yet it's rather curious. When I used to read fairy tales, I fancied that kind of thing never happened, and now here I am in the middle of one.
"Mary Ann! Mary Ann! Fetch me my gloves this moment!" How strange. Well, I'll go round and get in at the window.
You won't.
After waiting until she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get hold of anything, but
Ah!
she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame.
Pat! Pat! Where are you?
"I'm here, digging for apples, Your Honour."
Digging for apples indeed. Come and help me out of this. Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?
It's an arm, Your Honor.
An arm? You dullard! Whoever saw one that size? It fills the whole window.
It does at that, Your Honor, but it's still an arm.
Well, it's got no business there at any rate. Go and take it away.
I don't like it, Your Honor. I don't like it at all. Not at all.
Do as I tell you, you coward.
Alice spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time,
Ah!
there were 2 little shrieks and more sounds of broken glass.
I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay in here any longer.
Where's the other ladder?
Bill's got it.
Bell, fetch that ladder here, lad. Put it up at the corner.
You'll need to tie 'em together first. They don't reach half high enough yet.
Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Bell, catch hold of this rope.
Will the roof bear?
Mind that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down. Ed's below.
Now, who did that?
It was Bill, I fancy. Who's to go down the chimney?
Nay, I shan't. You do it.
I won't.
Bill's to go down.
Here, Bill. The master says you're to go down the chimney.
Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he? I wouldn't be in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick a little.
Alice drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could and waited till she heard a little animal scratching and scrambling about in the chimney above her. Then she gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen.
There goes Bill.
Hold up his head. Brandy now.
Don't choke him.
How was it, old fellow? What happened to you? Tell us about it.
Well, I hardly know. I'm a good deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like a jack in a box, and up I go like a skyrocket.
So you did, old fellow.
We must burn the house down.
If you do, I'll set my cat on you. I wonder what they'll do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off.
A barrel full will do, to begin with.
A barrel full of what? Ouch! One of those pebbles hit me in the face. You'd better not do that again. I say, the pebbles are turning into little cakes. If I eat one of these cakes, it's sure to make some change in my size. And as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose.
She swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and soon found herself safe in a thick wood.
The first thing I've got to do is grow it in my right size again. And the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. That is an excellent plan. The only difficulty is I haven't the smallest idea how to set about it. I've got to grow up again. Let me see. I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other. But what?
Alice looked all around her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she did not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself. When she had looked under it, and on both sides of it, and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on the top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on the top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah and taking not the smallest notice of her or of anything else. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and addressed her.
Who are you?
I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have been changed several times since then.
What do you mean by that? Explain yourself.
I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, because I'm not myself, you see?
I don't see.
I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly, for I can't understand it myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing. Perhaps you haven't found it so yet, but when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will someday, you know, and then after that into a butterfly, I shall think you'll feel a little queer, won't you?
Not a bit. Who are you?
Well, I think you ought to tell me who you are first.
Why?
Well, really, I shall say good day to you.
Oh, come back. I've something important to say. Keep your temper.
Is that all?
No. So you think you're changed, do you?
I'm afraid I am, sir. I can't remember things as I used, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together.
What size do you want to be?
Oh, I'm not particular as to size. Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know?
I don't know. Are you content now?
Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be.
It is a very good height indeed. As you can see, I am 3 inches high.
But I'm not used to it.
You'll get used to it in time.
The caterpillar put the hookah into its mouth and began smoking again. This time Alice waited patiently until it chose to speak again. In a minute or two, the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and yawned once or twice and shook itself. Then it got down off the mushroom and crawled away in the grass.
One side will make you grow taller. The other side will make you grow shorter.
One side of what? The
Of
other
mu-
side of what?
A mushroom.
In another moment, the caterpillar was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the two sides of it. And, as it was perfectly round, she found this a very difficult question. However, at last she stretched her arms round it as far as they would go, and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand.
Now, which is which?
She nibbled a little bit of the right-hand bit to try the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this very sudden change, but she felt that there was no time to be lost, as she was shrinking rapidly, so she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot that there was hardly room to open her mouth, but she did it at last and managed to swallow a morsel of the left-hand bit.
My head's free at last.
Alice's delight changed into alarm in another moment when she found that her shoulders were nowhere to be found. All she could see when she looked down was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of a sea of green leaves that lay far below her.
What can all that green stuff be? And where have my shoulders got to?
As there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head, she tried to get her head down to them, and was delighted to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction, like a serpent. She had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in among the leaves, which she found to be nothing but the tops of the trees under which she had been wandering. Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting entangled among the branches, and every now and then she had to stop and untwist it. After a while, she remembered that she still held the pieces of mushroom in her hands, and she set to work very carefully, nibbling first at one and then at the other, and growing sometimes taller and sometimes shorter, until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height.
There's half my plan done now. How puzzling all these changes are. I'm never sure what I'm going to be from one minute to another. However, I've got back to my right size. The next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. How is that to be done?
As she said this, she came suddenly upon an open place with a little house in it about 4 feet high.
Whoever lives there, it'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits.
So she began nibbling at the right-hand bit again, and did not venture to go near the house till she had brought herself down to 9 inches high. For a minute or two, she stood looking at the house, wondering what to do next.
How strange. That footman looks very much like a fish. And that footman looks very much like a frog.
For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet.
From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no use knocking, and that for 2 reasons. First, because I'm on the same side as the door as you are. And secondly, because they're making such a noise inside, no one could possibly hear you.
Please then, how am I to get in?
Well, I shall sit here till tomorrow. Or the next day, maybe.
How am I to get in?
Are you to get in at all? That's the first question, you know.
What am I to do?
Or anything you like.
Oh, there's no use in talking to him.
Alice walked away from the footman and the house in her own thoughts.
Hello.
Alice was a little startled by seeing a large cat sitting on the bough of a tree and grinning from ear to ear. It looked good-natured. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought to be treated with respect.
Why do you grin like that?
I'm a Cheshire cat, that's why.
I didn't know that Cheshire cats grinned. I didn't know that cats could grin.
Oh, we all can, and most of us do.
Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?
That depends on where you want to get to.
I don't much care where,
Then it doesn't matter which way you go.
so long as I get somewhere.
Oh, you're sure to do that, if you only walk long enough.
What sort of people live about here?
In the east lives a hatter, and in the west lives a March hare. Visit either one you like, they're both mad.
But I don't want to go among mad people.
Oh, you can't help that. We're all mad here. I'm mad, you're mad.
How do you know I'm mad?
You must be, or you wouldn't have come here.
And how do you know that you're mad?
To begin with, a dog's not mad. You grant that?
I suppose so.
Well then, you see, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore, I'm mad.
It's called purring, not growling.
Call it what you like. Do you play croquet with the Queen today?
I should like it very much, but I haven't been invited yet.
You'll see me there.
And with that, the cat disappeared. However, it vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of its tail and ending with the grin, which remained some time after the rest of it had gone.
Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, but a grin without a cat. It's the most curious thing I ever saw in my life. I've seen hatters before, so the March hare will be much the most interesting. And perhaps as this is May, it won't be raving mad. At least, not so mad as it was in March.
She had not gone much farther before she came in sight of the house of the March hare. She thought it must be the right house, because the chimneys were shaped like ears and the roof was thatched with fur. It was so large a house that she did not like to go nearer till she had nibbled some more of the left-hand bit of mushroom and raised herself to about 2 feet high. There was a table set out under a tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea at it. A dormouse was sitting between them, fast asleep, and the other two were using it as a cushion, resting their elbows on it and talking over its head.
No, you can't sit down. There's no room.
No room.
Nonsense, there's plenty of room.
It isn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited.
I didn't know it was your table. It's laid for a great many more than 3.
Your hair wants cutting. Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Oh, I believe I can guess that.
Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it?
Exactly so.
Well, then you should say what you mean.
I do. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know.
Not the same thing a bit. You might just as well say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see.
You might just as well say that I like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like.
You might just as well say that I breathe when I sleep is the same thing as I sleep when I breathe.
It is the same thing with you. What day of the month is it?
The 4th.
Ah, 2 days wrong. I told you butter wouldn't suit the works.
It was the best butter.
Yes, but some crumbs must have got it as well. You shouldn't have put it in with a bread knife. Even dipping it in your cup of tea couldn't get it to work.
What a funny watch. It tells the day of the month, but doesn't tell what o'clock it is.
Why should it? Does your watch tell you what year it is?
Of course not, because it stays the same year for such a long time together.
Which is just the case with mine.
I don't quite understand you.
Have you guessed the riddle yet?
No, I give up. What's the answer?
Haven't the slightest idea.
Nor I.
I think you might do something better with the time than waste it in asking riddles that have no answers.
If you knew time as well as I do, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him.
I don't know what you mean.
Of course you don't. I dare say you've never even spoke to time.
Perhaps not, but I know I have to beat time when I learn music.
Ah, that accounts for it. He won't stand a beating. Now, if only you kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you liked with the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning, just in time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper a hint to time, and round the clock goes in a twinkling. 1:30, time for dinner.
Is that the way that you manage?
Not I. We quarrelled last March, just before the hare went mad, you know. It was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing, "Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, 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 twinkle." Ah, I'd hardly finished the first verse when the Queen jumped up and bawled out,
"He's murdering the time! Off with his head!"
How dreadfully savage.
And ever since that, he won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now.
I'm getting tired of this. Suppose we change the subject. I vote the young lady tells us a story.
I'm afraid I don't know one.
Then the dormouse shall.
Wake up, dormouse!
I wasn't asleep. I heard every word you were saying.
Tell us a story.
Yes, please do.
And be quick about it, or you'll be asleep again before it's done.
Once upon a time, there were 3 little sisters, and their names were Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well. And so these 3 little sisters, they were learning to draw, you know.
What did they draw?
They drew all manner of things. Everything that begins with an M, such as mousetraps and the moon and memory and muchness. You know, you say things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see a drawing of a muchness?
I don't think that
You
that's...
shouldn't talk.
Well, really?
This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going. She looked back and saw the Hatter and the March Hare were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot.
I'll never go there again. It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life.
She noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it.
That's very curious. But everything's curious today. I think I might as well go in.
Once more she found herself in the long hall and close to the little glass table. She began by taking the little golden key and unlocking the door that led into the garden. Then she went to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket till she was about a foot high. She walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it busily painting them red. Alice thought this a very curious thing, and she went nearer to watch them.
Look out, Five. Don't go splashing paint over me like that.
I couldn't help it. 7 jogged my elbow.
That's right, Five. Always lay the blame on others.
I heard the Queen say only yesterday you deserve to be beheaded.
What for?
That's none of your business, too.
It is his business, and I'll tell him. It was for bringing the cook tulip roots instead of onions.
Well, of all the just.
Why are you painting those roses?
You see, miss, this ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put in a white one by mistake. And if the Queen was to find it out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So you see, miss, we're doing our best afore she comes to...
The Queen! The Queen!
First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. These were all shaped like the 3 gardeners, oblong and flat, with their hands and feet at the corners. Next, the 10 courtiers. These were ornamented all over with diamonds and walked 2 and 2 as the soldiers did. After these came the royal children. There were 10 of them. They were all ornamented with hearts. Next came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognised the White Rabbit. It was talking in a hurried, nervous manner, smiling at everything that was said, and went by without noticing her. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion. And last of all this grand procession came the King and Queen of Hearts. When the procession came opposite to Alice, they stopped and looked at her.
Who is this? What's your name, child?
My name is Alice, so please, your majesty.
Alice. Alice. Can you play croquet?
Yes.
Come on, then.
It's a very fine day.
Very. Where's the Duchess?
Hush, hush. She's under sentence of execution.
What for?
Well, she boxed the Queen's ears. No, hush, hush. The Queen will hear you. You see, the Duchess came rather late, and the Queen said,
"Get to your places!"
People began running about in all directions, tumbling up against each other. However, they got settled down in a minute or 2, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet ground in her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The balls were live hedgehogs, the mallets live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up and to stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. The chief difficulty Alice found at first was in managing her flamingo. She succeeded in getting its body tucked away comfortably enough under her arm, with its legs hanging down. But generally, just as she had got its neck nicely straightened out and was going to give the hedgehog a blow with its head, it would twist itself round and look up in her face with a very puzzled expression. When she had got the flamingo's head down and was going to begin again, the hedgehog had unrolled itself and was in the act of crawling away. Besides all this, there was generally a ridge or furrow in the way wherever she wanted to send the hedgehog to, and as the doubled-up soldiers were always getting up and walking off to other parts of the ground, Alice soon came to the conclusion that it was a very difficult game indeed. Alice was looking about for some way of escape when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her very much at first, but after watching it a minute or two, she made it out to be a grin.
How are you getting on?
I don't think they play at all fairly, and they don't seem to have any rules in particular. And you've got no idea how confusing it is, all the things being alive. The arch I've got to go through next is walking about at the other end of the ground, and I should have croqueted the Queen's hedgehog just now, but it ran away when it saw mine coming.
How do you like the Queen?
Not at all. She's so extremely likely to win that it's hardly worthwhile finishing the game.
Who are you talking to?
It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire cat. Allow me to introduce it.
I don't like the look of it at all. However, it may kiss my hand if it likes.
I'd rather not.
Don't be impertinent, and don't look at me like that.
A cat may look at a king. I read that in a book, but I don't remember where.
Well, it must be removed. My dear, I wish you would have this cat removed.
Oh, off with its head!
I'll fetch the executioner myself.
Alice thought she might as well go back and see how the game was going on, so she went in search of her hedgehog. The hedgehog was engaged in a fight with another hedgehog, which seemed to Alice an excellent opportunity for croqueting one of them with the other. The only difficulty was that her flamingo had gone to the other side of the garden, where Alice could see it trying to fly up into a tree. When she got back to the Cheshire Cat, she was surprised to find quite a large crowd collected round it. There was a dispute going on between the executioner, the king, and the queen.
You, child, settle this argument for us at once.
What argument, Your Majesty?
I have been asked to cut the head off this creature.
Yes?
Well, it doesn't have a body. It's just a head.
I see.
You can't cut the head off something unless there's a body to cut it off from. I've never had to do such a thing before, and I'm not going to start at my time of life.
What poppycock! Anything that has a head can be beheaded. You shouldn't talk such nonsense.
Unless something is done about this in less than no time, I'll have everybody executed all around.
I believe the cat belongs to the Duchess. You'd better ask her about it.
She is in prison. Fetch her here.
And the executioner went off like an arrow. The cat's head began fading away the moment he was gone, and by the time the executioner had come back with the Duchess, it had entirely disappeared.
Don't think how glad I am to see you, my dear old thing.
The Duchess tucked her arm into Alice's, and they walked off together.
The game's going on rather better now.
'Tis so, and the moral of that is, oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round.
Somebody said that it's done by everybody minding their own business.
Ah, well, it means much the same thing, and the moral of that is, take care of the sense and the sounds will take care of themselves.
You seem very fond of finding morals in things, Your Grace.
Everything's got a moral, if only you can find it. I'm doubtful about the temper of your flamingo.
He might bite, that's true.
Very true. Flamingos and mustard both bite. And the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together.
Only mustard isn't a bird. It's a mineral, I think.
There's a large mustard mine near here. And the moral of that is, the more there is of mine, the less there is of yours.
Oh, I know. It's a vegetable. It doesn't look like one, but it is.
I quite agree with you. And the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be. Or, if you like it put more simply, Never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others, that what you were or might have been was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be otherwise. You seem deep in thought, my dear.
I've a right to think.
Just about as much right as pigs have to fly. And the moral of that is...
You there!
Oh, a fine day, Your Majesty.
Now, I give you fair warning, either you or your head must be off, and that in no time. Take your choice.
Your Majesty.
Let's go on with the game.
The other guests had taken advantage of the Queen's absence and were resting in the shade. The moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game.
Back to it. Any moment's delay will cost you your heads.
All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarrelling with the other players. Those whom she sentenced to execution were taken into custody by the soldiers, who of course had to stop being archers to do this. By the end of half an hour or so, there were no archers left, and all the players, except the King, the Queen, and Alice, were in custody and under sentence of execution.
Have you seen the mock turtle yet?
No, Your Majesty. I don't even know what a mock turtle is.
A mock turtle is the thing mock turtle soup is made from. Come on then, and he shall tell you his history. You, Griffin, up lazy thing.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Take this young lady to see the mock turtle and hear his history. I must go back and see after some executions I have ordered.
Off with her head!
What fun!
What do you mean?
Why, it's all her fancy. They never execute nobody, you know. Come on.
Everybody says, come on here. I've never been so ordered about in all my life.
They had not gone far before they saw the mock turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely on a little ledge of rock. And as they came nearer, Alice could hear him sighing as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply.
What is his sorrow?
It's all his fancy. He hasn't got sorrow, you know. Come on. Here, old fella, this young lady, she wants to know your history, she does.
Oh, I'll tell it her. Once I was a real turtle. When we were little, we went to school in the sea. The master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise.
Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one?
Because he taught us.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such a question. Drive on, old fellow. Don't be all day about it.
Yes, we went to school in the sea. We had the best of educations. In fact, we went to school every day. I took the regular course.
What was that?
Reeling and writhing, of course, to begin with. Then the different branches of arithmetic, ambition, distraction, uglification and derision. We also had mystery, ancient and modern, with seography, then drawing. The drawing master was an old eel. He taught us drawing, stretching, and fainting in coils.
What was that like?
Well, I can't show you myself, I'm too stiff. And the Griffin never learned it.
Hadn't time. I went to the classics master, though. He was an old crab, he was.
I never went to him. He taught laughing and grief, they used to say.
So he did. So he did.
And how many hours a day did you do lessons?
Oh, 10 hours the first day, 9 the next, and so on.
What a curious plan.
Well, that's the reason they're called lessons, because they lesson from day to day.
Then the 11th day must have been a holiday?
Of course it was.
And then there was the games, of course.
Ah, yes, the games. As a Newman, you may not have lived much under the sea. And perhaps you were never even introduced to a lobster.
I once tasted lobster.
You what?
No, never.
So, you can have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is.
You first form into a line along the seashore.
2 lines. Seals, turtles, salmon, and so on. Then, when you've cleared all the jellyfish out the way.
That generally takes some time.
It does. You advance twice.
Each of a lobster is a partner.
Advance twice. Set the partners.
Change lobsters and retire in same order.
Then you throw the lobsters as far out to sea as you can.
Swim after them.
Turn a somersault in the sea.
Change lobsters again.
Back to land again. And that's all the first figure.
It must be a very pretty dance.
Come, let's hear some of your adventures.
Well, I could tell you my adventures, beginning from this morning, but it's no use going back to yesterday because I was a different person then.
Explain all that?
No, the adventures first. Explanations take such a dreadful time.
Well, this morning I saw a white rabbit. He wasn't like a usual rabbit. He had a pocket watch and a waistcoat, and he could talk. So I followed him down the rabbit hole and found myself here. I nearly drowned myself in a pool of my own tears and had to get dry, so a dodo suggested a caucus race. I dried off, but then got myself trapped in a house. I managed to get out, but then I met a caterpillar who told me that eating a mushroom would make me bigger or smaller as I wished. After that, I met a Cheshire cat and attended a very strange tea party. Then I got to play croquet with the Queen, who suggested that I come and hear your history.
That's very curious.
It's all about as curious as it can be.
The trial's beginning.
Come on.
What trial is it?
The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne when they arrived, with a great crowd assembled about them. All sorts of birds and beasts, as well as the whole pack of cards. The knave was standing before them in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him. And near the king was the white rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the very middle of the court was a table, with a large dish of tarts upon it. They looked so good that it made Alice quite hungry to look at them. Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read about them in books, and she was quite pleased to find that she knew the name of nearly everything there.
That's the judge, because of his great wig.
The judge, by the way, was the king, and as he wore his crown over the wig, he did not look at all comfortable, and it was certainly not becoming.
And that's the jury box. Those 12 creatures, I suppose, are the jurors.
Silence in the court.
Herald, read the accusation.
The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer day. The knave of hearts, he stole those tarts and took them quite away.
Okay, jurymen, consider your verdict.
No, not yet, not yet. There's a great deal to come before that.
Call the first witness.
I call the first witness, the Hatter.
Why do you have a teacup and a slice of bread and butter with you?
I beg pardon, Your Majesty, for bringing these in. I hadn't quite finished my tea when I was sent for.
Well, you ought to have finished. When did you begin?
14th of March, I think it was.
15th?
16th.
Take off your hat!
It isn't mine.
What? Stolen?
No, sire. I keep them to sell. I have none of my own. I'm a hatter.
Oh, okay, give me your evidence and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot.
This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other. In his confusion, he bit a large piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at this moment, Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a good deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and she thought at first she would get up and leave the court, but on second thoughts, she decided to remain where she was as long as there was room for her.
She wouldn't squeeze so I can hardly breathe.
I can't help it. I'm growing.
You've no right to grow here.
Don't talk nonsense. You know you're growing too.
Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace, not in that ridiculous fashion.
Now then, Hatter, give your evidence, or I'll have you executed, whether you're nervous or not.
I am a poor man, Your Majesty, and I hadn't begun my tea, not above a week or so, and with not with the bread and butter getting so thin, and the twinkling of the tea.
The twinkling of the what?
It began with the tea.
Of course, twinkling begins with a T. Do you take me for a dunce? Go on.
Most things twinkled after that. Only the March Hare said...
I didn't.
You did?
I deny it.
He denies it. Juryman, you may leave out that part.
Well, at any rate, the Dormouse said...
The Hatter looked anxiously round to see if he would deny it too. But the Dormouse denied nothing because he was fast asleep.
After that, I cut some more bread and butter.
What did the Dormouse say?
That I can't remember.
You must remember, I'll have you executed.
I am a poor man, Your Majesty.
You're a very poor speaker. If that's all you know about it, you may stand down.
I can't go any lower. I'm on the floor as it is.
Then you may sit down.
I'd rather finish my tea.
Oh, you may go.
And take his head off outside.
Call the next witness.
I call the next witness, the Duchess.
Give your evidence.
I shall do nothing of the sort. No, shan't.
Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness.
Well, if I must, what are tarts made of?
The way my cook makes them? Pepper, mostly.
Treacle, surely.
Collar that Dormouse. Behead that Dormouse. Turn that Dormouse out of court. Off with his whiskers!
For some minutes, the whole court was in confusion, getting the Dormouse turned out, and by the time they had settled down again, the Duchess had disappeared.
Oh, never mind. Call the next witness. My dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. It quite makes my forehead ache.
I call the next witness, Alice.
What do you know of this business?
Nothing.
Nothing whatever?
Nothing whatever.
That's very important.
Unimportant, Your Majesty means, of course.
Unimportant, of course, I meant. Important, unimportant, unimportant, important, unimportant. Silence in court! Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court. That means you, young lady.
I'm not a mile high.
You are.
Nearly 2 miles high.
Well, I shan't go, at any rate. Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now.
The impertinence! It's the oldest rule in the book.
Then it ought to be number 1, not number 42.
Jurymen, consider your verdict.
There's more evidence to come yet, so please, Your Majesty. This paper has just been picked up.
What's in it?
I haven't opened it yet, but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody.
It must be that. Or unless it was written to nobody, which isn't at all usual.
Who was it directed to?
It isn't directed at all. In fact, there's nothing written on the outside. Oh, it isn't a letter at all. It's a set of verses.
Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?
No, they're not.
Oh.
He must have imitated somebody else's hand.
Please, Your Majesty, I didn't write it, and they can't prove that I did. There's no name signed at the end.
Well, if you didn't sign it, that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man.
That proves his guilt. Off with his head!
It proves nothing of the sort. You don't even know what they're about.
Oh, read them then.
Where shall I begin, so please, Your Majesty?
Oh, begin at the beginning, go on until you come to the end, then stop.
They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what would become of you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2, you gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before.
That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard. So now, let the jury...
If any one of them can explain it, I'll give him 6pence. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it.
If there's no meaning in it, that saves a world of trouble, you know, as we don't need to find any. And yet, I don't know. I seem to see some meaning in them after all. Said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you?
Do I look like it? I'm made entirely of cardboard.
All right, so far. We know that to be true. That's the jury, of course. I gave her 1, they gave him 2. That must be what he did with the tarts.
But it goes on, they all returned from him to you.
Why, there they all are. The tarts are all on one plate. Nothing could be clearer than that. Let the jury consider their verdict.
No. Sentence first. Verdict afterwards.
Stuff and nonsense. The idea of having a sentence first.
Hold your tongue.
I won't.
Off with her head.
Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards.
At this, the whole pack rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to fight them off. She found herself lying on the bank, with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face.
Wake up, Alice dear. Why, what a long sleep you've had.
Oh, I've had such a curious dream. I met so many wonderful creatures. A cat with a huge grin, a caterpillar that smoked a hookah, a griffin and a mock turtle. I went to a very mad tea party and played croquet with flamingos and hedgehogs. I ate food to make me shrink and drank drinks to make me tall. I was a witness at a trial, and I took part in a caucus race, and there was somebody called...
It was a curious dream, dear. Certainly. But now we must go in for our tea. It's getting late.
So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well she might, what a wonderful dream it had been.